Well, if he manages to get past the allegations about his behavior, Democrats worry Dr. Jackson will become a pushover for the Trump administration when it comes to reforming the Department of Veterans Affairs.
The political people in the White House push so hard for privatization, do the Koch brothers bidding. That's what they're all about. To the point that I was going to ask at the hearing, how hard are you going to fight? Are you willing to be fired making that fight for veterans?
Well, the VA has been called the swampiest of the D.C. agencies. That's saying something. Even Democrats like Senator Brown questioned ousted Administrator David Shulkin's efforts to try to reform it. So let's talk about it with North Carolina Congressman Mark Walker, chairman of the Republican Study Committee. Great to see you tonight.
Always a privilege.
Okay, so let's talk about this issue with Dr. Jackson. First of all, I know on the House side you don't have to play a part in confirming him, but how concerned are you about the allegations swirling around and now questions arising about whether he's going to get to a confirmation hearing?
Well, any kind of allegations as members of Congress, whether you're in the House or Senate, are something that we should take serious. However, we've seen a pattern of character assassination that's happened for many of these nominations to be confirmed. But I look back at President Obama's. Ed Henry mentioned the 2016 remarks. President Obama also in 2014 gave great praise to the doctor as far as how he had connected and traveled with his family. So this wasn't just a one-time. President Obama said over the years that this gentleman performed great service. So it's interesting this information only comes out now. It is something that needs to be vetted, but I believe from what I've seen, this is a man of character. Time will tell.
It will, and he says he's looking forward to the hearing. He wants to get in there and answer the questions, so he's anxious to rebut what's being said about him. In the meantime, a number of prominent Democrats in the Senate have said it's complete no-go for him if he's going to be for privatizing in any way the Veterans Administration. You heard from Senator Sherrod Brown there. Here's a little bit more about what he had to say about whether the vets want that or not.
I don't know any veterans, organizations or individual veterans, the hundreds of veterans I talk to pretty regularly in Ohio. I don't know of any that thinks that privatizing the VA does anything except enrich the owners of the new privatized VA and compromise the care of veterans.
What do you make of this? Because this is a litmus test for a lot of these Senate Democrats.
It is. There are pros and cons to privatizing the VA. Some of the bureaucracies have infiltrated some of these organizations, so sometimes they're a little slanted. Could you be able to cut costs, maybe even to shorten the times? You could. But remember, veterans have served the federal government, so ultimately it is the federal government's responsibility. If you push that off to the private sector, that could create additional problems. Is it in need of some reform? There are some great reforms. 2017, we've added to the Veterans Choice Act, which allows after 30 days for these veterans to be able to have quick care. We saw back in the Obama administration some very strong horror stories over that time. So in members of the House and the Senate, we continue to try to improve, but it is a big leap to go to the privatization at this point.
Well, and I saw an interesting stat today. I'd heard some numbers thrown around, but we looked at this in this study by the Military Times, saying that last year about a third of all medical appointments were at sites outside the Veterans Health Administration. They say in some part this is already happening simply because the VA is so overwhelmed. Numbers of people, 10 different people, either on a permanent or interim basis over the last 10 years or so, have headed up this agency, many of them coming in with great promise and bipartisan support. Why is it so hard for our veterans to get this right?
Well, I believe we've not had the proper legislation that held people accountable. We recently passed legislation in 2017, again under this administration, that allowed us for the very first time to go after employees that weren't doing their job. I believe the last record that we've counted, 1,873 employees have either been fired, removed, or demoted in 1 year. Part of our RSC budget that we're adding to that is to expand that to all federal employees. Imagine that federal employees in these agencies that are part of the swamp actually have to do their job during the day instead of being protected by federal law.
Well, a lot of folks would like to see that. They'd like to see just fewer federal employees altogether, and they've often talked about how hard it is if somebody has legitimately done something wrong. It's still difficult to make sure they get through the disciplinary process and have real accountability.
Shannon, there's no question about that. Serving on the House Oversight Committee, I remember we brought in witnesses that had observed whistleblowers of people watching certain websites all day long and not really doing their job, but there was no accountability. What we're trying to do is expand the Whistleblower Act to increase and to add across the line to all federal agencies. That way we can hold more of these federal employees accountable.
Congressman and RSC Chairman, great to have you with us tonight. Thanks for stopping in.
Always a privilege. Thank you.